What's going on, guys? Welcome back to this channel that's all about architecture, engineering and construction, and we're also all about bettering the African narrative. Okay, so in the last video we decided to start a series where we are going to be talking about different parts of a building and the different considerations we make while we actually designing certain parts of a building, and also post doing the construction as well. Okay, because there are certain things on a house that you might not be sensitive about when the construction is going on, but later on they actually affect you, where you're not very comfortable living in your house because certain things were not considered and you actually can't go back on that. Okay, in this video we're going to basically be talking about heights of houses, because you see that as time passes on, heights of houses are actually getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and when it comes to things like the height of a house, it's something you actually can't go back on. What I mean is that actually if your building has been built already, you can't actually say now I want to increase on the height of the building. Okay, that's very tricky, most especially if it's actually a storage building. For example, if you are to look at many of the things happening in the Western world, be it through movies, be it through YouTube videos, be it through anything, you realize that people's houses are actually much shorter. You realize that, for example, in any house, in most of the houses you see that is usually apartments, the height of the building is literally just about 30 centimeters above the average height of a human being. Okay, that's really short, that someone can even just stretch their hand and actually touch the ceiling. But in this video I'm going to be illustrating what is actually the advantage of having high ceilings. Okay, now high ceilings are actually different from double volumes. I don't want us to confuse these two. We have high ceilings and we also have double volumes. The double volume is actually where you deliberately choose to not have a slab over the living room, for example, so that above the living room, usually that's the living room, okay, where above the living room you actually don't have any slab up, and the height of the house at the part of the living room actually goes straight up to the roof. Okay, now that's different from having high ceilings. Now high ceilings is just when you deliberately just choose that my roof or my roof is slightly going to be above the average. The average height of a house is going to be 3.1 meters, but many builders usually just consider this as, if it's 3.1 meters, you do not consider the depth of the slab, and the beams that is actually going to take. So when you had planned for something like 3 meters or 3.1 meters, and then you do not consider the height of the slab, that is the thickness or the depth of the slab, you realize that the effective height of the house ends up becoming something like 2.9 meters. Okay, so in the near future you say I want to now have a gypsum ceiling. Along the way, when you have built your house or when you are building your house, you decide I want to have a gypsum ceiling. Now when you choose to have a gypsum ceiling, you realize that the height of the house becomes actually even shorter, because the depth of the gypsum work itself is going to take just about 25 to 30 centimeters. So a house that was originally 3.1 meters, because of the slab, ended up becoming about 2.9 meters, and after adding gypsum, the height of the house actually ended up becoming around 2.65 meters. So you find that the effective height of the house that you actually have is about 2.65 meters, which is relatively shorter. Okay, but it's important that when you're building your house, if you plan to have a gypsum ceiling, or even if you don't even plan to have a gypsum ceiling because you're doing it as a contingency, it's important to make your house slightly taller than the average, at least 3.3 meters or 3.2 meters, so that even when you choose to have a gypsum ceiling, you'll have an effective height of about 3 meters sharp, which is relatively a good height for a ceiling, at least 3 meters and above. So anyway, in this video I want us to discuss the different advantages of having a high ceiling. One of the very major advantages of having a high ceiling is because you're able to take advantage of the natural light that comes into the house. That is through the windows and also through the doors. If you have a high ceiling, you realize that you have a lot of light that comes into the house through the windows and the doors, since they are also equally as tall as how high you've chosen your house to be. Okay, then the other advantage is actually ease of air circulation. When you have a high ceiling, you actually end up having the advantage of having bigger windows and also bigger doors in terms of height, and then realize that air is easily circulated within the house, and you never have the house heating up faster, or you never have so you always have the house being cool all around the year. Even when the weather is hot, you find that your house is actually cooler than the general standard of houses that are around. Okay, then the other advantage is that in the future you might actually plan to sell your house, to resell your house. Believe me or not, if you're actually planning to resell your house, a house that has a high ceiling has way more value than a house that is just a standard house. If there were two houses equally the same, and then someone had to choose between the two of them, and one has a high ceiling and one doesn't have, the high ceiling is definitely going to win the election. Okay, So that's very important as well. Also, most importantly, which I think is actually the most important point, having a high ceiling on your house makes your house actually feel more spacious. Okay, when you sit in a house that has a high ceiling, you feel like there is actually more space than the actual space that is in the house. Okay, so I think when you are building your house, next time you might want to consider that having a high ceiling. Okay, you might want to choose just slightly above the average, which is usually 3.1. Like I said, it is the standard usually 3.1, but in actual sense, after you deducted the depth of a slab and the beams and all of that, you actually have about 2.95 meters. So the next time you're actually building your house, you might want to consider having a house that has at least about 3.1 meters. So if you want a house that has a height of about 3 meters or 3.1 meters, you might want to raise your slab slightly above to about 3.3 meters. 3.3 meters. Okay, so that's very important. I hope you guys had something to learn from this video. If you've had something to learn from this video, please give it a thumbs up, and also thank you very much for watching, and